KHQ TV, Spokane, Coeur d'Alene. From the Inland Northwest, Q6 News with Randy Shaw, Julie Humphreys, Diane Barone with weather, and Dan Kleckner with sports.
Good evening. We're glad you could join us tonight.
Idaho State Police are investigating a fiery automobile crash on Interstate 90 that claimed one life, put 2 other people into a Spokane hospital. The accident happened just outside Post Falls, Idaho, near the Greyhound racetrack. A woman driving a car with New York license plates was killed in the crash and the fire that followed.
The New York plated vehicle was eastbound on I-90. For some odd reason we don't know yet, lost control, crossed through the median into the westbound lanes, was struck by a Washington plated car. Both people, passenger and driver of the Washington plated car, had been taken to Sacred Heart Hospital at their request by Post Falls ambulance to be checked out. As both vehicles were engulfed in flames. The fatality in the front vehicle was, right now, identification is completely impossible due to the fire.
Authorities tonight have identified the woman killed in the crash as 51-year-old Emily Casper of New York City. The 2 Washington State drivers were identified as 46-year-old Lynn Ulrich and 44-year-old Jean Ulrich. Lynn Ulrich was treated and released from Sacred Heart Medical Center. His wife Jean remains in the hospital tonight for observation. And fire crews, the Washington State Patrol, and Washington Water Power officials are at the scene of an accident on the 8700 block of Trent tonight. A car apparently slammed into a power pole, knocked the pole and its wires down to the street. There are injuries reported. There's no word on how serious those injuries may be, and no word on whether any other cars were involved in the accident. Washington Water Power is currently trying to restore power to some residents in the dark tonight.
Spokane police are searching for a bank robbery suspect tonight. A man around 30 years old walked into the Seafirst Bank near the corner of Division and Wellesley. Authorities say he brandished a handgun and was carrying a pillowcase. The gunman ordered the teller to put money into the pillowcase. Instead, the teller threw the money at him. He reportedly grabbed some of the cash and fled, leaving the pillowcase behind. He is described as a white male, 5'9", about 130 pounds, wearing a light blue or gray suit. He is still at large tonight.
A new drug trend has arrived here in Spokane, and according to city police, it's a very dangerous operation. Officials say the bust of a suspected methamphetamine lab yesterday is the 5th such bust in the last 6 months. As Gary Derigold tells us, with the meth labs comes the danger of explosion.
These chemicals are what authorities say amounts to a bomb. Among the chemicals taken during a raid Thursday on a suspected methamphetamine lab is a gallon of ether, enough to cause a devastating explosion in this house.
It would be a tremendous fireball type of explosion involving that house. And as close as the houses were yesterday, probably would have caught the rest of them on fire, too. Not a single resident...
Spokane Police Special Investigations Lieutenant Roger Bragdon says Spokane hasn't yet seen any blasts at meth labs, but Tacoma has.
In the last month, they've had 2 explosions. One was a booby-trapped laboratory, and the other one was set off when an officer turned on a light switch, and the fumes in the lab, which was probably ether, exploded.
Bragdon says methamphetamine is now replacing crack cocaine as the popular drug of choice on the street. He says meth cost about the same as crack. The 10 ounces authorities say was being cooked at this location is estimated to be worth about $80,000 on the street. He says meth is only recently showing up in local drug arrests on the street. What worries him is not only the dangers of the drug, but the threat to neighborhoods from the volatile laboratories, threats of explosion and exposure to deadly chemicals. Gary Derigold, Q6 News.
A man accused of lighting an apartment building on fire with 2 young children inside will go to trial next month. Fire investigators say 23-year-old David Merle Murdoch set fire to the building last year, just 1 day after being evicted from the apartment building. Passers-by noticed the smoke and flames and pulled the 2 children to safety. Murdoch was arrested in Los Angeles earlier this year on a first-degree arson charge while being held on an unrelated charge. He will go on trial August 14th in Spokane Superior Court.
Employees at the Centennial Mills in Spokane grabbed signs and hit the streets today. Employees are unhappy with the Archer, Daniels, and Midland Company, which took over operations in 1981. Workers say since ADM took over, they have lost many benefits, including vacation and holiday time. And employees claim they've only received a 1.5% pay increase in 4 years, while management keeps making money. Workers say they won't strike because they lack the manpower. No one with ADM was available this afternoon for comment.
It appears tonight the Interlake School in Medical Lake is going to have to be reduced in size, and that's not the only piece of bad news for the facility. A state survey team found that Interlake is low in staffing, has some serious problems with its buildings, which means the entire school must be downsized. Roughly 50 residents will be forced out of their homes. And if the facility doesn't meet a list of federal requirements within 11 months, the school will lose all its federal funding. Officials say the facility wasn't designed to house developmentally disabled residents.
The space is not large enough to do active treatment. The bathroom facilities aren't made for our residents, our type of residents who are in wheelchairs. And so we don't have enough space is the big thing.
Stangler adds she doesn't know where the 50 residents will go because several schools for the developmentally disabled are going through the same kind of crisis.
City officials in Medical Lake are looking at a plan to form their own utility district. But as Wayne Haverly reports, Washington water power officials are treating the idea as a hostile takeover attempt.
The city of Medical Lake is in need of money. City officials are considering a plan to increase the town's revenue by forming its own utility district. A consultant says the city could increase its annual budget by $250,000 a year by distributing its own electricity.
That represents about 20% of our entire $1.3 million current expense budget, so you can figure that would help the city of Medical Lake for now and for the long time in the future.
But that figure is based on a $1.8 million acquisition price. Rob Fukai is the Vice President of Operations for Washington Water Power.
We think that they've missed the boat on what the property's worth by a factor of about 4 or 5 times.
Fukai says that would mean higher rates for Medical Lake residents. But city officials are convinced the idea deserves a close look.
The state of Washington owns nearly 2/3 of the land in Medical Lake, and the state pays no property tax. Mayor Ramsey says forming a local utility would force the state to pay its fair share to the community.
This is a way that the remaining citizens can, if you will, enjoy some of the profit of having the institutions here.
City council members are expected to decide whether to put the utility district proposal on November's ballot at their August 1st council meeting. In Medical Lake, Wayne Haverly, Q6 News.
And still to come on Q6 News this Friday night, there is more information on what may have happened to an East Coast pilot who crashed near the Bahamas. We'll fill you in.
Plus, President Bush makes a move to clean our air, but critics say the move is tainted. We'll have a report.
In national news tonight, there is still dispute over the body count from Wednesday's United plane crash in Iowa. United says there were 293 people on the plane and all are accounted for. The National Transportation Safety Board says there were 297 and one is still missing. While the numbers and identifications are being sorted out, investigators are concentrating on what caused the crash. They know it was an exploding engine, but just how the engine exploded is a mystery. Today, investigators got a look at the ring section of the plane. It is the section that is supposed to stop an explosion. However, in this crash, the ring itself was blown apart. Also today, there were accolades for pilot Al Haynes, who handled the DC-10 for 35 minutes before it crashed. The father of one boy who survived had this message for Haynes.
Opportunity now to, if you'll see this, I won't affect you. You did a miraculous job. Even though I don't know you personally, we love you for it.
There was also praise today for the people of Sioux City who opened their hearts to the injured. After hearing of the crash, this man's first reaction was to turn on the TV for news.
I thought, no, that's not the right thing to do. Turned around right around here where the blood bank's right back up here. I said, went back, went in. That's the first time I ever given blood. I was kind of afraid of needles, but decided that this was a good time to do it.
NTSB officials now say 186 people survived the crash, 110 died.
There's more information out tonight on that East Coast pilot who crashed his plane near the Bahamas. A Coast Guard flight surgeon is now suggesting the pilot, Thomas Root, was shot several hours before his small plane crashed in the Atlantic. Root claims he passed out at the controls and the plane flew on automatic pilot for almost 4 hours before it ran out of fuel and then crashed. Root claims he thinks a gun fired when the plane crashed. But the Coast Guard doctor who first treated Root says he found infection in Root's abdomen.
A presidential plan to clean up our air has been passed on to Congress. President Bush submitted the bill, then attempted to clear the air of any political opposition.
Anyone who allows political bickering to weaken our progress against pollution does a tragic disservice to every city in America and to every American in this country who wants and deserves clean air.
However, environmentalists charge the bill is weaker than the version the president proposed 1 month ago. Environmentalists claim Bush bowed to industry pressure to dilute the measure. The bill requires reductions in dangerous automobile emissions. However, it would allow some models to exceed the standard if other models came in under the limit. On acid rain, the White House says the bill should lead to drastic reductions in sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide emissions. But critics claim it would actually permit an increase in nitrogen oxide levels. And when it comes to smog, last month's proposal would have permitted the 3 worst cities to exceed smog standards in the year 2000. Now, a total of 9 cities would be exempt. White House officials admit some concessions were made to industry, but claim the overall objective for clean air will still be met.
Flags waving in protest brought letters of support from President Bush and Vice President Quayle to the city of Coeur d'Alene. Some city residents expressed their anger over the recent Supreme Court decision allowing flag burning by displaying Old Glory all over town.
To veterans and everybody else. This is our symbol of this country. We ought to stand up for it.
I just think it's a terrible thing to do to our flag and for our country. I think it's very important to have respect for our flag and not to treat it that way.
The governor of Idaho and elected officials support the idea flags could be seen waving from the cemetery, front porches, and business windows. Red, white, and blue ribbons were even found tied around trees in Coeur d'Alene. There's more news coming your way tonight. Diane says hold on to that sunscreen. Weekend weather forecast coming up.
Plus, we will take you to a $1 million town that's up for sale. Get the checkbooks ready.